What are you supposed to do when you have a lawnmower with a bad engine? Now, the easiest thing to do would be to leave it on the curb the evening before trash day and watch it disappear. But there is another option, however, it's not for everyone, and after seeing this video, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. That option is to repower that mower with a new engine, but it's not as cut and dry as you might think. In fact, if you're not very careful, you could be wasting a lot of your precious time. In today's video, we take a look at this Honda lawnmower, and the problem is that this engine is in poor health, and after talking to my friend who owns it, has decided to repower it with another engine. Now, I've already fixed this mower, and if you want to see that video, there should be a link to it at the top of the screen or at the end of the video. And I'm just going to use the video as a background while I talk about some of the reasons why you should do this, but also mention some of the problems that come with it. Now, before I go on, I do want to caution you about doing this kind of project. It seems like a pretty easy job to do, and it is, but there are some safety concerns with it. And if you choose to go through with it, just be safe and don't take any risks, otherwise you're going to have a rough day. Now, the most common reason I've come across as to why an engine needs to be replaced with a different one is lack of maintenance, as shown by the tiny amount of oil that came out of this engine. Now, a lack of lubrication won't kill it immediately, but instead take a use or two before it happens. However, if the engine has no oil in it, it won't take long for it to pop. What that means is, if you don't want to check the oil each and every time you use your mower, you still have a chance to save it by checking it every other time. But you do risk something bad happening if you forget that one time, which unfortunately has happened to me before. Don't worry, that mower is going to be an upcoming project, so you're going to see what happens when you forget to check the oil. The other reason why you would want to repower a mower is because you've hit something hard with it and damaged the crankshaft. That's because the cost involved with fixing a mower with a bent crankshaft can sometimes be as much as a new mower. But if you can find another engine to replace the damaged one, it'll be a lot more affordable. But how do you go about finding another engine? Now, this part is going to be a bit tricky, so you can either buy a new engine, which will be quite expensive, and if you're going to have someone else do the work for you, it'll end up being more than you want to pay. Your best option is to get a used engine instead, but as you might have guessed, that option has a lot of problems too. Of course, you're not going to buy a perfectly good used mower only to take the engine off from it. Instead, you'll want to find one that maybe needs a lot of work to get going again or has a damaged mowing deck. But even then, you're still going to take a risk on that engine being in good condition as well. Now, once you've found that parts mower, you may not want to take the engine off that mowing deck just yet. If you have the time and the ability, you might want to get that engine running on the parts mower first. That way, you won't waste your time taking it off the parts mower only to find that once you've got it on your mower that it has a serious problem, and you might have to abandon that engine to get another one. Now, the spare engine I had for this project was bought like this. I never had the whole thing. However, I did check that the engine starts and runs before going through with the project. Now, I got lucky with this spare engine in that it was exactly what I needed, so let me explain why. Now, for Honda engines, there are a couple of variations. Most don't have much difference between them, but this one was special. The reason why is because this one needed to support a blade clutch system, which some Hondas are not meant to deal with. Now, for most other brands, all you need to do is make sure the crankshaft is the correct length and size, otherwise you're going to have some issues. The first issue is that if your crankshaft is too long or too short, when you bolt up your blade to it, it could cause it to sit too low or too high in relation to the edge of the mower. The other issue is if the diameter isn't the same, the blade adapter might not fit, which means you could lose the ability to use your self-propel. Now, there are ways around these issues. However, if you just ensure that the crankshaft is the same size, you can avoid all these headaches. Now, fortunately, this engine was virtually the same when it came to the crankshaft, but there was one major difference that worked in its favor. Now, the original engine on this mower was only sized at 160 cc's, which made plenty of power. However, more is always appreciated. Now, the replacement engine was a lot bigger at 186 cc's, which may not seem like a lot, but you're certainly going to notice the difference when you get in the tall grass. Now, depending upon which brand of engine you want to use, there's nothing wrong with getting a bigger engine. However, not all brands will have this choice. Now, if you're dealing with a Briggs & Stratton engine, you'll have the option of going with the older and larger flathead, which is my engine of choice just so long as you can find a good one. However, I'm not opposed to getting the newer overhead valve engines too, but it's not my first choice. Now, just to let you know, I've had a lot more success when it comes to swapping engines on a Briggs equipped mower, mainly because it almost seems like it was something the designers had in mind. I do have one small tip, especially if the spare engine is coming from a different brand of mower, and that is you might want to find a way to deal with the stickers. Now, what I mean by that is it's a bit confusing if you see a Toro sticker on the plastic engine cover despite the mower being a Craftsman. So what's so bad about having mismatched stickers? Well, it boils down to if you plan on selling the mower. To give you an example, I worked on a Toro mower last year that was missing its plastic cover. Now, it's not a big deal, but my plan was to sell it, and without the cover, it looked a bit odd, at least it did to me. Now, before I ended up selling it, I did have a spare cover to put on it, but it came off a Craftsman mower, so it had all the wrong information on it. So what did I end up doing then? Well, I simply removed the stickers so that it couldn't lie about what was underneath it. So yes, I could have just bought some new stickers that only said Toro on them, but the penny pincher in me said that was a big waste of money. And the reason why was that there were plenty of other stickers on the mowing deck letting you know what brand it really was. So for me, paying $5 to $10 for another sticker to put on the plastic cover was just a little too much. And besides that, I would have had to add the additional cost of the stickers to the asking price, which I'm sure most of the buyers were happy not paying for. So besides the wrong stickers, bad blade positioning, and the possibility of losing your self-propel, what other issues do I need to watch out for when replacing engines? Now this next one is a bit of a long shot, and you'll see why I say that. The problem has to do with parts and maintenance, and it mainly relates to when you replace the engine with something that wasn't meant to be on there. Let me explain by using cars again, only because consumers seem to have more knowledge about cars than lawnmowers. Let's say you just bought a used car and it was real cheap, but it seemed like a good deal. And after a couple of months of using it, you plan on doing a tune-up on the engine, but after getting the spark plugs, oil, and filters, you realize that some of the parts don't match. And after some research, you find out that the person who sold you the car had replaced the engine but used a different version of it. And even though they're still pretty close, there's still enough of a difference that some of the parts turned out to be different as well. That's almost the same situation here. Luckily, almost all the maintenance parts for these Honda engines are basically the same. Now, don't hold me to this, but I'm still not sure if the carbs are the same between these two engines, and even if they are the same, the jets might be different and might need to be swapped later on. While I'm down here at the crankshaft, you can see just how special it looks in comparison to a typical one. This is the reason why I needed to make sure the donor engine was equipped with a clutch as well. Don't worry, yours is probably not going to look like this, so take it as a blessing. Now for a Honda engine without a clutch, all you'll need to do is install the blade adapter, which might also include the drive pulley followed by the blade. And for those of you who don't know, I'm not a big fan of clutch blade systems, only because it's just something else to fail in the future. I like simple setups, and as you can see, this is not terribly complicated, but I can do without it. The reason why is because the ball bearings in these assemblies have the chance to lock up and cause all sorts of issues with them. It really depends upon how the mower was used and what kind of conditions it's stored in, but I'd rather not have to care to that extent. And even when they are stored in a shed or a dry garage, it's still not a guarantee that you won't have a problem with it in the future. Now, if you intend on doing this kind of project on your own to save a couple of bucks, I think it's a great idea. And if you do but still need some guidance, there are plenty of videos online that'll help you out. The other option is to ask a friend or someone who might have already done it for advice or any good tips. So do I have any good advice to give to those who are watching and are considering doing this? Well, you bet I do. The first bit of advice is to drain out all the fluids from the engine. This will help reduce the chance of a fire and keep it from making a mess. The second tip would be to document what you do either by writing down stuff or by taking pictures. I still use this method when I deal with long projects that might take a couple of days to complete, and it also gives me checkpoints to work with later on. The next tip relates to the last one, which is take your time, and if you need to take a couple of days or weeks to do it, then that's perfectly fine. Don't rush this project, otherwise you could make a mistake and cause more headaches later on. Now the last piece of advice is something that I try to tell everyone no matter what kind of project it is, and it was something that I mentioned earlier in the video, and that is to be safe. I'm not going to go into great detail, that's up to you to decide, just be careful is all I can say. Now this project took a couple of hours to complete, and in my mind, despite the investment in time, was definitely worth it. The mower itself was in great condition, and the only real problem was the worn out engine. That means if your mowing deck has holes in it or is structurally compromised, replacing the engine on it may not be a great use of a spare engine. At that point, I consider getting a good used mower, or it might be time to get yourself a brand new mower instead. Of course, this would be a great time to consider getting an electric mower, but take it from me, I'd stay with gasoline, especially if you'd like to let your grass grow tall before cutting it or you need self-propel. I know gasoline has its issues, but as long as you check your oil periodically and run the engine until empty before you put it up for winter, you should be fine. Now as for this one, I can only hope they'll try and take care of it. However, I've already looked into the future for this mower, and they decided that I should be the one to take care of it for them. Now, I really didn't sign up for this kind of responsibility, but I guess they know themselves well enough to know that they simply won't take care of it. I really can't blame them though, because if I could pass some of my responsibilities onto someone else, I would do it too. Now, this engine isn't the healthiest one I've ever heard, but beggars can't be choosers. The worst part is, it still sounds better than what came off of here. I guess we'll see if this mower comes back this next season, but if I have anything to do with it, you won't be seeing it again. So my question is, have you ever done an engine swap on your lawnmower or even something else? And if so, what was it and how did it go? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.